The candles were lit, casting a warm, buttery glow over the dining table. I had spent all day cooking Spencer's favorite Italian meal, and I was wearing the emerald silk dress he always said made my eyes sparkle. This was our 1-year anniversary. The clock on the wall read 7 minutes past 8. The front door finally opened and Spencer walked in, but he wasn't smiling. He was wearing a forced, tight look, and he didn't even notice the effort I had made. He tossed his keys onto the marble console. "Amelia, I am so sorry," he said, his voice flat. "I actually need to have dinner with Miles tonight. It's a huge, last-minute emergency. Business is business, right?" My heart dropped like a stone. Miles, his childhood friend, who was apparently more important than our anniversary. I forced a smile that felt like broken glass. Just as I started to ask about the emergency, his phone buzzed on the counter. The screen lit up with a notification from a photo-sharing app. The message wasn't from Miles. It was a selfie taken in a dimly lit high-end restaurant. Spencer was laughing, his arm draped around a beautiful, blonde woman I didn't recognize. The caption read, "Best anniversary dinner, love you, Z." The sight of her hand resting intimately on his chest was the immediate, fiery gut punch of betrayal. The world went silent, and a cold, hard rage instantly replaced the sorrow. What the hell just happened to her? My immediate reaction wasn't tears. It was a deep, chilling stillness. The beautiful dinner, the silk dress, the whole perfect scene felt like a cruel joke. Spencer, oblivious to the photo still glowing on his screen, was already halfway to the bedroom, muttering about getting ready for Miles. I am Amelia Cross, 34 years old, and a former corporate finance director who gave up everything for this man. I relocated 3 states away, leaving behind a career and my entire support system to support his move to start his big tech company. This dinner wasn't just ruined. It was an act of complete, arrogant disrespect. The painful truth hit me. He didn't just forget the anniversary. He actively chose to spend it with someone else, using a ridiculous, easily exposed lie. The title echoed in my mind. My husband said he needed to have dinner with his childhood friend on our 1-year anniversary. I grabbed my phone and quickly snapped a photo of the image on his screen, securing the evidence before the notification vanished. This was the moment the victim died and the strategist took over. I knew then that his childhood friend was the least of his secrets. The betrayal was layered and went back years, mostly fueled by Spencer's mother, Patricia. Patricia never stopped reminding me that Spencer was a rising star and that I needed to be his supportive, flexible wife. When I moved, I gave up my huge salary and took a break, planning to restart my career later. Patricia constantly pushed the narrative that my career pause made me less important. "Spencer is under so much pressure, dear," she'd say, her smile tight. "He needs stability, not drama." The concept of his childhood friends was part of this narrative. He had a tight-knit group, Miles, a man, and Zoe, the woman in the picture. They were always referred to as the gang, and Spencer always made me feel jealous and petty if I questioned their constant late-night meetings. This maltreatment, the gaslighting from Patricia, and the public humiliation of the anniversary lie were all converging. I had sacrificed my independence for a man who didn't respect me, and a family who only saw me as an inconvenience. The emotional stakes were sky high because I had nothing left here but this marriage. I was isolated. My savings were tied up in the expensive house we bought together, a house that Spencer constantly reminded me was mostly his investment. His company, Ignite Solutions, was his obsession, and his entire family treated it like a future gold mine. I knew the truth, though. Before I quit my job, I had quietly managed our personal investments. I knew that Spencer's financial records were messy. When I was moving my personal funds into a separate, secure investment account after we got married, I saw huge, suspicious transfers between Spencer's personal account and Ignite Solutions. He was always vague about the company's funding. The memory of that financial mess, combined with the photo of Zoe, solidified my plan. This wasn't just an affair, it was an entanglement. I needed to know the full extent of the financial disaster he was hiding behind the lie of childhood friends and a busy career. Spencer finally emerged from the bedroom, looking impatient. He didn't even apologize for being late, just grabbed his wallet. Look, don't wait up. This is a crucial business dinner. I looked directly at him, forcing my expression to be calm and slightly worried. Oh, Miles? Is he okay? Is everything all right with Ignite Solutions, Spencer? You look stressed. The mention of the company name made him flinch. Yes, fine. Just technical problems, he snapped. Don't bother with the dishes. I'll deal with them later. He walked out the door, leaving me in the candlelight with the cold, untouched dinner. The second the door clicked shut, I rushed to his office. Spencer, in his supreme arrogance, kept a ledger of his personal investments in a desk drawer, secured by a flimsy 4-digit code, the year his beloved old car was manufactured. It took seconds to open. Inside, I found a detailed ledger of the company's early investors, and there, listed as a major stakeholder with the largest seed investment, was Zoe P. My blood ran cold. She wasn't just a girlfriend. She was a business partner and one of the founders. The realization that Zoe was a major shareholder and business partner, not just a fling, twisted the knife of betrayal. This was a deep, calculated secret, a financial entanglement that predated our marriage. Spencer hadn't just cheated on me. He had built his entire career with the woman he was still sleeping with, while selling me the dream of being the supportive wife. I photographed every page of the ledger, paying close attention to the early investment figures and the corresponding dates. I noticed something else: large, recurring transfers labeled consulting fee, going from Ignite Solutions to a shell company. I needed to follow that money trail. My next strategic move was to secure my legal and financial position. I immediately called Mr. Vance, my old family's lawyer who lived in my home state. I asked him to review the prenuptial agreement that Spencer had insisted upon. Spencer had been dismissive of the prenup, saying it was just a formality to protect his future millions. I, however, had quietly negotiated a crucial clause, a massive financial penalty if either party committed marital fraud or financial misconduct that jeopardized the marital assets. Mr. Vance confirmed my suspicions. The marital fraud clause was rock solid. If I could prove Spencer's ongoing relationship with Zoe was tied to the creation or funding of Ignite Solutions, it would be a major breach, potentially awarding me a substantial percentage of the company's value, even after only 1 year of marriage. The key was the financial misconduct. I began my undercover operation. Using my professional skills, I created a sophisticated anonymous firewall and used a secure tunnel to access public financial records related to Ignite Solutions. What I found was shocking. The company was not the booming success Spencer pretended it was. It was hemorrhaging cash, relying heavily on a massive, short-term loan. The only thing keeping it afloat was the promise of a huge, upcoming government contract, the one he was supposedly meeting Miles about. This contract was their lifeline. The stakes were now clearer. I wasn't fighting for love. I was fighting to expose a financially sinking, fraudulent ship. My path to revenge was clear. I had to eliminate his lifeline. My first strategic, methodic move was to strike at the heart of Spencer's arrogance, his bid for the government contract. The contract was with the Department of Defense, DoD, requiring a meticulous proposal and absolute financial transparency. Spencer thought he had an inside track. I knew better. I immediately established a separate, fully legal, and professionally staffed consulting company, the Artemis Group. I funded it with my independent investment savings, the money Spencer didn't know about. I hired 2 highly discreet, sharp-eyed former colleagues from my old firm. Our mission: to quietly submit a superior, highly competitive bid for the exact same DoD contract. I wanted to defeat him not through emotion, but through sheer corporate competence. The internal monologue was cold. You wanted to be the rising star? Let's see how you shine when you face a real competitor. The tension was electric. I knew I had to work faster and smarter than Spencer, who was distracted by his affair and his failing company. The emotional roller coaster started to pick up speed when Spencer's mother, Patricia, called. She sensed distress and immediately directed her control and gaslighting toward me. Amelia, Spencer is so stressed about this DoD contract. He needs you to be his rock right now. Why aren't you going to his office more? You're home all day, dear. He needs your support, not your quiet judgment. She was pushing me back into the role of the subservient wife. I kept my voice perfectly polite. I am handling some personal affairs, Patricia, but Spencer knows I support his work. I deliberately didn't mention my real work. The crucial reveal came when Patricia let slip an important detail about Zoe. Zoe is just wonderful, Amelia. She's been working day and night on the funding presentation for the DoD. She's essentially running the company for him. This confirmed that Zoe was the brains behind the operation, not Spencer. This allowed me to focus my attack on Zoe's financial documentation. Her weakness, not Spencer's, knowing she was likely taking shortcuts. The pressure on Spencer and Zoe mounted as the deadline for the DoD proposal neared. I spent countless nights with my small Artemis team, dissecting every public document related to Ignite Solutions. We discovered a fatal flaw in Zoe's financial presentation. They were using heavily inflated, unaudited revenue projections and hiding the massive short-term loan from their investors. This wasn't just poor accounting, it was potential corporate fraud, a violation of the DoD's strict anti-fraud policy. My strategy was to ensure the Artemis Group's proposal was flawless, and then at the last minute, anonymously send a highly detailed, professional analysis of Ignite Solutions' financial discrepancies directly to the DoD's Internal Ethics Review Board. This was the long game, a move that would not only cost Spencer the contract, but expose his potentially criminal activities to the highest level of government scrutiny. The small emotional detail. I watched Spencer pacing the living room late one night, muttering nervously into his phone, his anxiety feeding my icy resolve. The power shift was subtle but palpable. Spencer started treating me with a forced, exaggerated kindness, buying me expensive, unnecessary gifts. He wasn't doing it out of love. He was doing it because he needed a stable home base and a quiet wife while he fought his financial battles. He assumed my silence meant I was still the supportive, submissive partner. One evening, he casually mentioned an upcoming investor meeting for Ignite Solutions, a critical meeting designed to bridge the cash gap if the DoD contract was delayed. Patricia will be there, he added. She's nervous about the valuation. This was the chance I needed to turn his arrogance against his own family. I knew Patricia had invested a large, undisclosed sum of her own money into Ignite Solutions. If I could expose the fraud to her before the DoD contract was lost, she would turn on Spencer instantly, creating a powerful internal enemy. I needed to gather hard, actionable proof for Patricia. I knew the investor meeting required detailed financial projections. I waited until Spencer was supposedly having a late work meeting, code for dinner with Zoe. I used my old corporate security expertise to bypass his office security. The house was dead quiet. I entered his study, found his work laptop, and located the investor presentation file. It was locked, but the password was predictably arrogant. His childhood nickname followed by $001. Inside, the numbers were even worse than I thought. The loan was double what was publicly reported, and Zoe had signed off on the fudged revenue sheet. I quickly copied the presentation, along with the detailed breakdown of the loan. As I was closing the laptop, I saw an email pop up from Zoe. Need to stall the old bag, Patricia, on the valuation. Tell her the market is volatile. She can't know about the loan. This raw, disrespectful dialogue was the perfect evidence of their deceit and arrogance toward his own family. The emotional roller coaster plunged into the deep personal conflict with Patricia. I sent the files, the fraudulent presentation, and Zoe's dismissive email to Patricia's private encrypted email address, using a throwaway account moments before the investor meeting. I included a simple, anonymous message. Ask Spencer about the loan and the market volatility. I knew Patricia's control and distrust would force her to challenge him immediately. I imagined the chaos erupting in that boardroom. The moment Patricia realized her son and his girlfriend were not only betraying his wife, but were actively jeopardizing her significant personal investment. The result was instantaneous. Spencer called that afternoon, not yelling, but with a voice shaking with cold fury. "What did you do, Amelia? My mother just went ballistic. She wants a full audit. She thinks Zoe is bleeding the company dry." He still didn't suspect me. He thought I was too stupid, too emotionally crushed to be capable of such a strategic strike. The tension in the marriage was now unbearable, a carefully contained bomb. Spencer was a raging narcissist, convinced the world was conspiring against him. He blamed Patricia's old-fashioned paranoia and Zoe's careless email. He gaslit me constantly, trying to re-establish control. "See, Amelia, this is why I need stability. This chaos is all outside of my control." Meanwhile, the Artemis Group's bid for the DoD contract was quietly moving forward, and the DoD Ethics Board was now formally reviewing the financial documents I anonymously provided regarding Ignite Solutions. The power was shifting dramatically. Spencer was spending all his time battling his own mother's auditors, completely distracted from his real competitor, me. I felt a surge of cold, exhilarating satisfaction. The next step was to eliminate Zoe's financial stake in the company, crippling them both simultaneously. I contacted Mr. Vance and instructed him to discreetly purchase the large, short-term loan that was crushing Ignite Solutions. The loan, which Spencer and Zoe thought was held by an impersonal bank, was small enough that I could purchase it outright through a series of shell companies controlled by the Artemis Group. This was the masterstroke of the long game. By owning the debt, I controlled the company's immediate survival. The tension was immense as the purchase finalized. The next day, I received a notification. The DoD contract proposal review meeting was scheduled. Spencer and Zoe would be pitching their bid against the Artemis Group's live. The stage was set for the final, catastrophic confrontation. The irony was devastating. Spencer would be facing his jobless wife in a corporate battle, a woman he never saw as a threat. The scene ended with me confirming my flight details to the capital city where the pitch would take place. The scene of the final corporate battle felt like a cinematic thriller. I arrived at the highly secured DoD building, not as Amelia Cross, Spencer's wife, but as A.C. Smith, the anonymous lead consultant for the Artemis Group. I wore a sharp, neutral suit and thick-rimmed glasses, a complete professional mask. Spencer and Zoe were already there, looking strained but overly confident. They didn't recognize me. They were huddled, whispering frantically. Spencer, seeing my small, polished team, scoffed loudly to Zoe, "Look at these new firms. They don't stand a chance." His arrogance was his final, fatal weakness. The presentation started. Spencer and Zoe's pitch was polished, but relied entirely on the fudged revenue projections I had already exposed. When it was the Artemis Group's turn, I took the lead. I spoke with the confidence and precision of my former corporate life, presenting a flawless, financially sound proposal that directly addressed all the weaknesses in the competition's plan. The tension in the pitch room was thick enough to cut with a knife. The DoD board members, already alerted by the ethics review, asked Spencer pointed, specific questions about his inflated revenue figures and the massive short-term loan. Spencer and Zoe stammered, their carefully crafted facade crumbling under professional scrutiny. I watched, my face impassive, as Spencer looked desperately at Zoe for an answer, exposing their codependence. Then the power shift became absolute. The board chair looked at me and asked a final question. "Ms. Smith, your bid is superior, but we have one concern about the competition. Can you assure us that your firm can handle the financial demands if the competition were to default?" I stood up, walked to the center of the room, and delivered the knockout blow. "I can assure you, sir," I said, my voice steady, because the Artemis Group recently acquired the short-term debt of the competing firm, Ignite Solutions. We now effectively control their financial liability. The big twist hit the room like a physical shockwave. Spencer, hearing that his small, seemingly manageable loan was now controlled by his direct, superior competitor, turned white. He finally looked at me, really looked at me, and the recognition hit him, not just of my identity, but of the depth of my professional betrayal. He lunged across the table. "You, Amelia, you bought my debt? You set this up." Security immediately restrained him. Zoe screamed, accusing me of industrial espionage. I stood perfectly still, my eyes cold and steady. As the largest debt holder, Spencer, I acted in the best financial interest of my investment. I stated professionally, using the language he always dismissed me for. The DoD board chair, horrified by the outburst and the financial conflict of interest, immediately disqualified Ignite Solutions and awarded the multi-million-dollar contract to the Artemis Group. The downfall of Spencer was agonizingly complete. The immediate consequence of losing the DoD contract was the bank recalling the entire loan, which I, as the new debt holder, immediately pushed for. Zoe, facing exposure of the corporate fraud she signed off on, immediately turned on Spencer. She called Patricia, throwing Spencer under the bus, claiming he forced her to inflate the numbers. I knew this because Mr. Vance had set up a legal listening mechanism on the property we shared, ensuring all conversations related to marital and financial assets were recorded. Spencer's life, built on arrogance and lies, was collapsing due to the very financial complexities he thought I was too pretty to understand. I drove back home that evening, not with celebration, but with a deep, quiet sense of justice. The dinner I had cooked on our anniversary, now cold and hard, felt like a symbol of his ruined life. The final emotional roller coaster began when Spencer, now utterly defeated, returned home. He was pale, his expensive suit rumpled. He didn't try to gaslight or rage. He just sat on the sofa, clutching his head. "I lost everything, Amelia," he whispered. "The company is bankrupt. Zoe is cooperating with the auditors." Then the ultimate twist. He tried to blame me through reverse gaslighting. "But you know, deep down, this is your fault. If you hadn't been so cold and judgmental about my work, I wouldn't have had to lie to you. If you had just supported me, I wouldn't have needed Zoe." I stood over him, my hands firmly on my hips. "You are not a victim, Spencer," I said, my voice firm. "You committed fraud, you cheated on your anniversary, and you underestimated the woman who once ran a better team than you ever could." I walked to the counter and threw the envelope with the divorce papers, already signed by Mr. Vance, onto his lap. The divorce proceedings were surgically clean, thanks to the evidence I gathered and the solid prenup. When Spencer saw the marital fraud and financial misconduct clause being activated, he realized the full depth of his mistake. The penalty clause meant I was legally entitled to a significant portion of the company's residual assets, along with a massive settlement, far exceeding what I would have received in a standard divorce. Patricia, having lost her entire investment and now facing the social shame of her son's corporate fraud, completely disowned Spencer. The favoritism and the pressure she had placed on me for years completely evaporated, replaced by her own desperate self-preservation. She even sent me a bitter, short note. "You were always the smart one, Amelia. I should have backed you." The irony was a satisfying final reward. The emotional catharsis was nearing its peak. I sold the house we shared, moving back to my home state to accept a senior executive position at a major financial institution, the job I had sacrificed for Spencer. I didn't need the money from the settlement, but I took every penny as payment for the year of humiliation and isolation. I gave Mr. Vance one last instruction: to ensure that the details of Spencer's corporate fraud, including Zoe's involvement, were made public in the financial press, destroying their professional reputations completely. My revenge was deep, legal, and absolute. I was no longer the supportive wife. I was the one who controlled the market. The final confrontation I craved wasn't emotional. It was the satisfaction of watching his arrogance be professionally extinguished. The final scene of Spencer's downfall played out in the financial news. The detailed story broke: the collapse of Ignite Solutions due to internal financial fraud and a failed DoD bid. Spencer's name, along with Zoe's, was synonymous with corporate deceit. He lost his company, his wealth, and his reputation. I heard through Mr. Vance that he was forced to move into his father's dilapidated old apartment, unemployed and socially ruined. Zoe was facing legal consequences for her role in the fraud. They were toxic together, and now they were broke together, a poetic form of justice. I, meanwhile, was celebrated in my old industry, hailed for my sharp business moves with the Artemis Group, which I promptly sold for a significant profit, maintaining my anonymity. The empowering takeaway was my complete liberation. I stood in my new high-rise office, looking out at the city skyline, a view infinitely better than the one in the house I shared with Spencer. The pain was gone, replaced by a deep, genuine self-respect. I realized that my power was never in my marriage, but in the competence and discipline Spencer and his family tried to minimize. I walked away from the wreckage of his life, not as a divorcee, but as a thriving executive who had successfully executed a brilliant corporate maneuver. I looked at the emerald silk dress hanging in my closet, no longer a symbol of betrayal, but a reminder of the night I decided I was worth fighting for. Spencer and Zoe never contacted me again. Their world had imploded, and I was simply a ghost of the past, the one who walked away with the winnings. My life was rebuilt stronger, rooted in my own achievements and my own financial independence. The final word on my revenge was the knowledge that I not only survived the betrayal, but leveraged it to build a far superior life. I wasn't just walking away. I was soaring above the ruins he created. I learned that your worth is not a commodity to be traded for stability. It is an inherent power, waiting for the right moment to be unleashed. The revolution happened when I decided to use my brains to write my own ending. I was extraordinary. If you've made it this far, you understand. Respect is non-negotiable. My worth wasn't defined by a fraudulent husband or the critical judgment of his family who thought my skills were secondary. My story proves that silence can be a weapon, and patience, especially in finance, can be the ultimate power. If this resonated with you, if you've been gaslit into invisibility for the sake of support, tell yourself this: your silence doesn't make you weak. Your boundaries don't make you difficult. Your survival makes you extraordinary. Never sacrifice your professional competence for a dishonest man. The revolution happens when you decide to write your own ending. He thought I was too emotional to notice the fraud. He didn't realize I was the one who bought his debt. Share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe.